Are we rolling?
Yes, we are.
Are we? We're not live. Are we live? I don't see a thing.
Oh, now
Oh,
we
here we
are. Okay.
go. All right. So we are live. And today we are trying something new. Normally I interview atheists often on this channel. Now I'm starting to branch out and I've found an up and coming leader in the Christian community. Yeah, an actual Christian who has got his own YouTube channel. And his name is James, and I think he calls his channel Modern Day Debate. Is that right, James?
That's right. Yes, it's modern day debate, and thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and especially glad I cut it so close. It's been a crazy afternoon, so I'm really glad to be here. Though this is always fun for me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Actually, I found out about you from Shannon Q. I guess she's co-moderated on your channel a couple times, but she
Yes,
had suggested that she said to me, "You got to meet this guy, James. You're going to really like him." So apparently, I'm going to really like you.
that's really
Um,
nice of her. Yeah, that's
well,
really nice.
she has a tendency to be a good egg. That Shannon.
Yeah.
Does she co-moderate sometimes on your channel, or how does that work?
Yes. Yeah. Especially so. My channel, My Hope. The reason that one of the reasons, I mean, I like Shannon a lot. We've gotten kind of started building a relationship over the summer, just when I came on her channel and talked a little bit. And she's a very pleasant person. She's very fun. She's fun to tease. But she's also, it's also actually nice that she's like a friendly, cooperative atheist that we can kind of bring to have more diversity of ideas at the channel. Even though I'm a Christian and I'm like, uh, you could say like an exclusive Christian, like I'm just like Christianity is the one way, and I have no, no apologies for saying that. Nonetheless, I do like that we have a diverse community forming in that it's hopefully truly nonpartisan, where as a Christian, I want to be there to kind of support people if they have a hard day. I'm even willing to, I know sometimes it's nice to have somebody just listen. And so I kind of want to have relationships with people. And I also want to have that kind of, like I said, diversity of thought, is that if we really are bipartisan and we really want to grow and challenge ourselves, then we should be interacting with people like Shannon as well as other ones.
Yes, I agree. And actually, I have cited Shannon numerous times as a role model for the atheist community. She's not the premier role model. That role has been taken by Digital Hammurabi. Shannon, if you're listening, you got to up your game, Shannon. But yes, I agree. So why don't you tell us what your channel is and what your mission is and why are you here, John? Or John? What about John? John, you're
That's
John.
right.
This is James.
Yeah.
Why are you here, James? What are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish with your YouTube channel and your Christianity? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so the I guess I could break it down into the vision, the mission, and then the values. And so, starting with the most broad, I would say that the vision is basically that we want to have a platform that's a lot like Unbelievable with Justin Brierley, except my goal right now is to definitely go daily. And
Oh,
we want
cool.
to, yeah. So I'm really excited for when we start the new year. That's definitely a goal I'm working on right now, putting into
Who's
place.
we? Who's we? If you don't mind.
Uh, I guess, I guess like there's nobody like on the like official partnership with me, but there I do have a lot of, you might say, a lot of unofficial partnership slash relationships with people that I've just received a ton of help from friends. Like
Okay, cool.
that's
Okay,
I think
gotcha.
why, like really why the channel's been growing recently is I've had so many different people that have been so supportive. It's like God's really blessed me there, and so we're trying to work into that goal. And it's a vision of a community that's hopefully like diverse, respectful of each other, and also we do like that it's got a relational component, because I know some people think that it doesn't have that very easily because it's online, but I in some ways I feel like I get along and feel more similarity with a lot of the people that I meet online and start building these kind of distant relationships, like geographically distant, than a lot
Yeah,
of the people I know in real life.
I tend to agree with that. My wife is always making fun of me because she goes, "You're fake friends on Twitter. You're not real like you." I'm like I make fun of her friends, and she goes, "Well, at least I'm hanging out with real people, and you're hanging out with like." And then I try and show her, like I'll show Stephanie, and I'll go, "Look, this here, see." this girl right here, and she just won't watch the videos. So she never actually understands that these are real people that we're interacting with. The difference is what makes it so successful that I find is that we're all here for a reason. We're all sort of on the same page, or trying to do the same things, or we have a common enemy, the atheists. So what's the vision of your channel? What's the day-to-day nuts and bolts? Is it going to be a debate channel, or?
Yes, we definitely. So I love apologetics. It used to be Modern Day Hysteria, which was a probably overly broad name for just you could say, discussing issues that people get excited about today. And then I wanted to go to more of a debate route. It's way better for me as an extreme extrovert to be able to form relationships. Being able to actually kind of interact with people, email and set things up, and then get to interact just like what we're doing right now. That's like the really fulfilling thing for me, is that I really enjoy people and those connections. So that's maybe the main reason, in addition to the fact that I get to learn things as well by talking to other people, that if I were to just read and then, okay, based on what I read, let me summarize this into a video script and put it out. That's good. Like, don't get me wrong. It's good to share. And that, I guess, being a debate host is maybe almost selfish in that, like, I'm getting to hear all these ideas. So it's a little bit self-interest in that way. I'm big on ideas. And I guess, like I said, that's kind of one thing
it gets your juices flowing to hear, like, Shannon go against Nephilim, and there's counter arguments, and you're just your role in this is, as I take it, you're just hosting these debates mostly. You're not participating. I deliberately didn't watch your channel since I knew you were coming on here, because I wanted to kind of not know and have you sort of put myself in the position of the audience where you explain it. So
definitely. So I will participate once in a while, and the way in which I would participate is usually, if sometimes, like, maybe a theist can't make it, they back out and they're like, oh, sorry, I need somebody to take my place. In some cases, I'll do that. There are some cases where there's like a topic that I feel like I'm well read enough to where I can say something interesting or potentially valuable to people. So like there's certain arguments that I really enjoy. So I do like to step in once in a while, but it's, again, like I said, it's nice when I can have kind of the host seat, because I get to meet two new people rather than just one. So, yeah.
Right. And so your goal is to kind of increase the level of the dialogue in the community at large between both atheists and Christians, or just in general?
Yeah, I would say definitely, well, more in general, because even though the channel so far has been primarily Christian versus atheist, right now, one of the things I'm also working on is that for the new year, I'm working on getting a greater diversity. And by that, I mean maybe Muslim debaters, New Age debaters, people from all walks of life. And so it is kind of, you could say, like bi-directional now, but we really do want it to be multifaceted in terms of the different people we have arguing in all the different directions.
Okay, so you want to branch out and have... so you're probably open to a lot of different types of topics, kind of like the non sequitur. They'll do a lot of different variety of topics. So you're kind of open that way too, it sounds like?
Yeah, like for me, I definitely want to start doing, we're going to start a new segment called Freaky Fridays, which is basically going to be debates that people would consider unorthodox, like is the earth flat? Do demon possessions still happen today? Or can aliens fit within the Christian worldview? All sorts of what some people would consider like different or out there kinds of ideas.
You should do one on the simulation hypothesis.
Oh, I definitely, yeah, you're absolutely right. I actually do.
They definitely will.
I know Inspiring Philosophy, he's got several videos that are at least fit within that theory quite a bit. And he's got some really good content on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely would like to do that. I think that'd be a blast.
Oh, so, and by the way, what is, you said to me a couple of times, sweet, anybody for sweet debates, and it's capital letters. And what does that mean? I was never sure what you meant by what you were.
That's just my enthusiasm oozing out. I
Okay,
really,
okay.
if you meet me in, I mean, like sometimes, like right now, I'm pretty like mellow. I meditated today, so I'm pretty like at peace. Like my mind slowed down. But I think most people, like if you meet me, and it shows a little bit maybe through today. I'm pretty high energy and enthusiastic, and that's all that is why sometimes a particular word will be all in caps.
I gotcha. Okay, so I thought it was some sort of thing that you were working on specifically. So your overall vision, and I want to get into your past and your Christianity and things like that in a bit. But your overall vision for the show is to have a daily broadcast of all different types of debates and mostly within a spiritual context, but it sounds like you want to branch out a little at least.
A
Is
little
this,
bit still anchored to spiritual topics, and I think that maybe even a tertiary or maybe like it's hard to like rank these or say which ones are more important, but definitely with modern day hysteria as well as today with modern day debate. And in the future, I want to definitely give people an example of Christian intellectuals giving a rigorous case for Christianity and its rationality. That's a huge deal. And so I'd say that's on par with the other ones. I would say that's the long-term goal. And I might eventually do a spin-off channel down the road that does apologetics again. But as of now, I really love this kind of, like I said, kind of following in the footsteps of Unbelievable with Justin Brierley.
okay, so now why don't you take us into your background? So, have you been a Christian your whole life?
No, actually, it's been only a third of my life. I'm 31. I became a Christian when I was 20, and let's see, I guess you could say I was raised in a home that was more, if I had to like call it a particular religion, it'd be like the Baha'i faith of like all
The
religions are
Baha'i?
true. Yeah,
Oh,
like kind of the idea that all religions are true. But I think you could say in contemporary in America, I would just maybe you'd call it religious pluralism, like that the idea of all these different
sort of like a
roads lead to
new
God.
age ecumenicalism type thing. Is that fair to
Not
say?
quite. I know that Baha'i like would make you think New Age, but I should say to be more accurate, I think in a Western context, it would be more of like a religious pluralism. Because my parents
Okay.
did go to Catholic church, or at least my dad did. He encouraged me to go there. But again, like I said, if you would have asked me when I was a teenager, I think I remember this even coming up once, where I was asked, "What do you believe?" And I was like, "Well, like all paths lead to God," and it's definitely not my
All
view now.
religions are one, man. It's all
Yeah.
good, dog.
Yes.
You,
Right.
you just gotta love people. What actually Baha'i. The reason why I associate it, I was actually really into the New Age before I became a Christian, and
Wow.
the Baha'i was one of the things that I thought. I remember I worked at a Starbucks, and this girl was talking about the Baha'i faith, and I was really like, yeah, that sounds like the deal. Like I thought it was. I was impressed with it.
Mhm.
So what type of youth were you? Were you rebellious? Where'd you grow up in those type of things?
Yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin, and I think that, other than like a small bit of rebelliousness in middle school, that was short lasting. I was pretty, like, for me, I was very goal driven, and I thought of things that might interfere with my goal as things to definitely avoid. And so I think even back then, before becoming a Christian, some of my lifestyle aligned with Christian bits and pieces, because I was definitely like, I was not living for the Lord, so there were pieces that were significantly not paralleled with it, and even the ones that were paralleled with it. So, for example, like I didn't like drink or do drugs in high school. Those things, though, it wasn't because I was like for the Lord. It was just still a self-interest type thing of
Because you were like driven to accomplish things, and you
yes,
were
I
focused.
exactly. At the
Exactly.
time, I wanted a football scholarship, so I was very.
Oh,
I
cool.
thought anything that I could do to be healthier, to perform at my very best, I would do it. And so I was actually, yeah, I was pretty like big on like, you know, always drinking protein shakes and always eating healthy and never drinking alcohol. Like didn't drink a drop until I was like 26. I had like a glass of wine. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
And so you actually played football? You were on the team?
yeah, I played in high school and then college, and that was at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and it was a great time. We had a spectacular coach, and we had a lot of. It was a successful program that I learned a lot of great lessons from, and I'm really
What were
thankful
you?
for. I was a nose tackle. I used to be a lot heavier, so
Oh,
I'm about
wow. You probably
6'1".
what, like 260 or something? You were
Yeah, I used to
probably?
be. Yeah, I was about 260, 270, and
Wow.
it was yeah, it's crazy now that I think about it, because now I've been like, since I stopped playing, I'm like 220, 230, something like that. And
One of the atheists that we interviewed was a professional football player for a year, Robert Reed.
wow.
I have a Yeah, yeah, he's a really good guy. We actually, John was here in the interview when Malibu was burning down, and we were interviewing Robert Reed, the atheist. Um,
Wow.
so take us to Christianity. What happened and why and how? Where you were what, 20 years old, and was it an
Yeah.
experience, or
Yeah.
you tell
So
us?
for sure, it was when I was in, actually when I was in high school. So, you know, I'd gone to, again, this is kind of like I was trying to use God as some sort of instrument in high school as a means to get more success. I thought if I go to church, maybe I'll get the good graces of a deity that would, you know, maybe I'd have a better week at school or at football or wrestling or whatever. And then after a while at senior year, I kind of realized it's like I'm going to church, but you know, it's like I don't even know what I believe. You know, like I said, it was superficial, kind of like superstitious stuff. And
Right.
then I eventually started thinking, well, I'm not going to go anymore. I'll pick up a Bible from Goodwill, and I just started reading it. And that, I think, was where God started to speak more. It at least became clearer to me that where I felt like God was leading, especially reading the words of Jesus in the New Testament, is along the time that I was reading it, there's something that resonated in a deep way, like a truth or wisdom essence that it had. And when I was in college, I continued on that spiritual search, and eventually, you know, found some friends who were also on a spiritual search, Mike and Michelle, and they invited me to their church, and I loved it. And through that, there's an authenticity there that I just
What
loved
type
with
of a
people.
church was this? What type of a church?
The first one was like Baptist, and that was actually where I think I became saved, where I accepted Christ at an altar call. And that was when I had this deep conviction of sin, where I just realized, um, wow, I can't save myself. Like I'm in trouble here. I can't just erase my sins because I've tried to do good stuff. Like that's not how this works, and I need
Really
a
interesting.
savior.
So you actually had an experience where you felt a conviction that you yourself were a sinner, and you felt that strongly?
Definitely. Yeah, it was huge. It was, I think for me, the hardest thing to believe wasn't that God existed or that God could do miracles. For me, the hardest thing was believing I could be forgiven. I thought
Wow.
I just thought, how could God forgive me with all that I've done, all the selfishness? Because I mean, that's like I said, even in high school, people would have maybe said like, oh, he's a really like good guy. But like I said, it
Right.
was
Yeah,
almost
you don't strike me as a particular, wasn't like you were like on furlough from prison and you had like killed people and you're like, how could God
right,
ever forgive me? It's like, I don't
right.
know, maybe you like had a library book overdue or something. You're like, I'm such a selfish
Yeah,
jerk. How could
yeah.
God ever forgive me?
It was, yeah, I think it was, you know, it was a deep conviction of realizing, I think I was even, you know, I hate to say it, because it's such an ugly trait, but I think I had some narcissism, you know, the whole college jock, you know, high school, I had a lot of success in sports, and you know, I was immature and not able to handle that like a real leader, a good leader. And it was like I was sometimes narcissistic or selfish and thought too highly of myself, among other things. Like, so that was why I think it was like a deep conviction over that as well as other things. And when I decided to believe, I don't know if I actually believed as much as I trusted. I still think I was saved because I felt like there was this renewed desire in me that, or I should say, not renewed, like brand new desire in me where the Holy Spirit was leading me to repent and start changing in a 180 direction to actually like live for the Lord rather than just always think of myself. And so that was like a sign that I think it was genuine. And even though it wasn't like, in a way it wasn't belief, like the intellectual belief wasn't theirs yet. I hadn't really gotten into apologetics yet, but it was a trust. And that's one thing is I think some atheists, they say, well, what if I could never bring myself to believe? And I'm like, well, I would maybe just give the next best thing. Like just try to trust in Christ as your Savior, or try to accept Christ as your Savior, because those words don't actually, they're not quite the same as believing. But I would think that if you have that much trouble believing, God would at least be more happy to have you trust in him and accept him rather than do nothing if you can't believe. And so anyway, that trust and acceptance eventually turned into belief, because God introduced me to a lot of the evidences that would make me think, no, this is like real. Like this isn't just like a, it's not just a subjective kind of thing in my head. This is, I think it's objectively true that there is like a personal God who's conscious.
So you started digging into apologetics somewhere. What years are we talking about? You're like 20?
Yeah, 20.
21?
Yeah, I'd say 21 was probably when I started to get into apologetics. And
okay,
that was just because I had so much trouble believing, and I had tough questions from friends at work, and I was excited about this newfound faith and excited to share it as well. But when I had these questions, I thought, I don't know if I can believe this. It was a really big dilemma for me. I was like, well, if there's no evidence and if it's not actually true, Paul himself said, like if Christ didn't really resurrect, like we're all just, in my words, like we're just kind of, we're lost fools, like we're just wasting our time. And so I thought this kind of the same in a way. Like I thought, if this isn't true, then even if I love it, it's just not something I can stick with. So apologetics definitely helped my faith immensely. And so I'm very grateful that John, like the Lord brought a friend named John into my life who shared apologetics and just blew me away, you could say.
Who is this guy? This is someone you're still friends with?
Yeah, we are friends. We don't get to talk as often just because, geographically we're farther apart. We used to live in the same place, and then things like having family and stuff like that is we don't get to talk as often. But he was kind of a mentor for me, and eventually after college I actually went on staff with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes because of him. And that was like where a ton of my growth in the faith happened, and that was because of John Kaus, who now he's actually like a superintendent for Doug Wilson's like younger like academies for like high school students, and which is an awesome thing, I think. And they've got like apologetics in the program and stuff like that. So yeah, he's doing well, and I'm very blessed to have had his influence.
Okay, cool. So you're living now. You're a Christian and you're growing in your faith. And take us to present, or take us to where we're at. So what happens? You're not married, right?
I'm not, and I'm open to it. Like if I found someone who knocked my socks off, I could settle down. But I'm pretty happy. Pretty happy single. Like I'm not really rushing it. And it's just, it's also because right now I'm really starting to develop a vision for the channel, to be honest, that along with my doctoral work is more than enough to fill my time. So after I got off staff with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, so that was during that time I started to get really into apologetics. So in addition to my first bachelor's in psychology, I picked up one in philosophy, applied for a master's program in philosophy at Texas Tech, and I got in there. Loved it. Superb experience. Great professors who taught a lot. I thought about the doctorate in philosophy at that point, but I thought, well, I don't know if this is, I love psychology. I love philosophy. Philosophy, just the job market's not quite as stable and steady. And so I thought, you know what, if I love them both, I'll just go with the more secure career route. And so I took a last minute sharp turn back into psychology and got a master's in psychology in East Texas at a small university. And now after I was there, I applied for the doctoral program here at Colorado State. And so I'm here at Colorado State, where this is my last degree, I promise. And then I'm going to for sure be done. I love it though. One thing is I meet grad students all the time and they don't love grad school. And I'm like you guys, like, I love it. Like I can't get enough of it. Like I enjoy what I do. I love that it's challenging. I love that it takes so much. I love the flexibility, being able to travel sometimes in the summer, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm happy. Like I guess at some point I'll have to move on, and I'm ready for that. But I'm enjoying it while I have it.
So you're driven. You're a goal-oriented person, but you're totally in pursuit of the things that you want to be in pursuit of. Is how I hear this. So you're pretty much happy as a clam. You're doing the things that you want to be doing on a daily basis. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that the vision that gets me excited the most is that through the psychology doctorate, my hope is that might be a platform for the apologetics type stuff, but also that both with psychology and through YouTube, my hope is that someday I'll be able to give substantial amounts to ministries, missionaries, having wells built where they don't have clean water, having food brought in to these places, parts of the world that are in severe poverty. And a lot of people don't realize like 26,000 children die every day because of poverty across the world. And for me, that's something I feel personally really called to, is that the goal-drivenness now is a result of saying I want to be able to give substantially to those in need. I'm not a very like luxury type guy. I'm like pretty basic. I get most of my stuff at like the thrift shop, and I'm happy with it. So my hope is that, Lord willing, I'll be able to give substantially to missionaries that are sharing the gospel and in serving the poor.
Cool. So what you've been on YouTube for? By the way, John, I don't know if you're reading the chat, but if anybody has questions, I don't even know if anyone's watching. If you see any interesting questions that somebody was assuming somebody's watching,
we've got at least one guy watching, but most of our viewers come after we finish live streaming. So,
really? Is that true?
I'll pop in. Yeah.
If you see anything interesting. So you started your YouTube channel, what, about a year ago, or did you do anything before that? That was official apologetics? Like YouTube is kind of you're officially starting a ministry. Were you doing anything like that prior in the last few years?
Yes. So I think it even started in college, where I started an apologetics group on campus as an undergrad. That was just something I was excited about. I wanted to share it with others. And then let's see. The second thing was going on staff with FCA got me a lot of experience of apologetics. Like we used to do like Stump the Chump, where I would go to different universities and they would recruit as many college kids as they could, and then they would just sit in the auditorium seating and just fire questions at me. I'd sit at the bottom with a little stool, and I loved it. And I had read a lot, so I felt pretty confident about being able to do it, and that definitely gave me experience. And then even in grad school at like Texas Tech, I still would try to organize apologetics events where me and other grad students would try to sit on a panel and answer tough questions.
Oh, so really? Of like what? Of an actual college audience type tough questions?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, wow. That's got to be. So what type of people would show up at something like that? There was probably hardcore atheists there too, right?
Yeah, sometimes. It definitely, we would get some, and it's not too, the atheist community, in my opinion, is not that hard to figure out in a lot of ways. I don't want to underestimate it, but so there are definitely some like really sharp ones who read a ton on the subject, and they're intelligent, and they can ask good questions to where you're even like, ooh, yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is. But they're like pretty rare. Like there aren't too many of them. A lot of them just kind of hear or read and repeat what they hear or read.
Right.
And
They parrot the Matt Dillahunty video, and they ask you the question from. Yeah, I noticed that the first couple of years, or the first year I was on Twitter, that a lot of the. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off. Go.
Yeah.
I just. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I definitely agree with that. That it's parrot. Yeah, they'll parrot the like Matt Dillahunty or even like worse, like Christopher Hitchens, who, don't get me wrong, like Christopher Hitchens was charismatic. He was fun to listen to. He was he seemed likable as a person in some ways, but like he, at the same time, like he wasn't a philosopher of religion. And so when atheists like go to people like that for their philosophy of religion, and then you see him debate William Lane Craig and he just gets crushed, like in a way the Christian can, the culture of pop atheism is, I mean, their leaders are oftentimes like these young, like 19-year-old kids, like Cosmic Skeptic or Genetically Modified Skeptic.
Drew has been on my channel. Drew's my friend, actually. He's a leader. Drew, you're a leader. If you hear this, you're a leader. I'll have him back on at some point. He might want to do your thing. Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off, but
and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that people aren't good in these areas because of their age, but if I was going to listen, let's say I were an atheist and I want to listen to the best there is, no offense to either, I don't mean this in a personal attack, but if I can listen to Cosmic Skeptic or Genetically Modified Skeptic, or I could listen to Keith Parsons, who's got a PhD in philosophy, and he's had another 25 years, well, probably 35 years to read philosophy of religion, peer-reviewed literature. To me, the answer seems obvious who I should be reading. And unfortunately, the atheist community as a whole, they're not reading Keith Parsons or William Rowe or J.L. Mackie. In other words, professional philosophers. They're listening to people who, I'm not trying to poison the well or anything, but I'm just saying it's just reasonable that you would go to the experts. But a lot of the atheist community,
a lot of the pop atheists are, it's the people who you mentioned, like they sort of started their own YouTube channels. They're not necessarily presenting themselves as experts. They're just kind of, they got caught up. There was a movement probably started about a decade ago with Christopher Hitchens and a lot of these guys popularized it. So, those people started their YouTube channels. But I hear what you're saying, to go in depth, you want to go up to higher levels, is I think what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that,
who are the names you mentioned? Keith Parsons?
Yeah. So Keith Parsons is like a PhD in philosophy of religion. He's retired now, but like top-notch, heavy-duty thinker. William Rowe, who he pretty much started the evidential problem of evil, which is, I think, like most philosophers would agree, and I would agree if you look at it, it's not. I still don't think it's a sound argument, but it's a better argument than the classic logical problem of evil. And that J.L. Mackie was good at pushing the logical problem of evil. Like he put it in a case that was, it plunged philosophy into darkness for a while, until Alvin Plantinga came along. So these are like really intelligent atheists. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that others aren't intelligent, but I'm saying if you want to get the best stuff, like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that they're depicting themselves as scholars, but for me, it's like, would I, as an atheist, if I were one, would I go listen to one or the other? I'd have to pick the scholars. So,
right. So, okay.
I do have a question from the chat, actually.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Stickman Sam was asking if you have a preference between the evidential apologetics or presuppositional apologetics.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. Like, I am open to presuppositional. Like, I think some evidentialists really rag on it. And like, there are arguments to listen to. I'm not saying that it's like wrong to rag on it, but I think I'm pretty open to both sides. I think it's I I'd have to read more of like I've never read Van Til. I've read a little bit of like Greg Bahnsen, but I'd have to read more Van Til, or I should say any Van Til, before I could like make a really informed statement on it. But it certainly doesn't bother me. I don't know that it's the case that I know that some presuppositionalists would argue that so the door swings both ways, where presuppositionalists will sometimes say that evidential apologists are missing the mark biblically, and I don't know if that's the case. Like I said, I probably have to read Van Til, but so I'm pretty open to evidentialism as well.
Are you doing at the same time that you're hosting videos? Are you working on your own apologetics from you? And how would you classify what your approach would be? If you
yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of. For me, part of the apologetics work now is getting to listen to the debaters. It's not as easy to listen to or read apologetic stuff. Unfortunately, now it's a little bit harder because it's gotten so busy with. Hopefully next semester I'll be able to be a little more efficient. I definitely usually take an evidentialist approach, and the reason is I think it's more easy for others to understand, to be honest. Presuppositionalism is a little bit more complex, I think, and I would use presuppositionalism if it was like for the right person.
Right. I agree with that.
In a way, I guess I'm a little bit pragmatist even, which is so like, I guess you could say there's like evidentialist apologetics and there's presuppositional, and then there's like a third category that doesn't quite fit. I think most people would lump it into evidential, but it's not actually evidential, is pragmatic arguments for belief, which would be like Pascal's wager. And that would be like a third form of apologetics. I actually have sympathies for that. Like I actually think there's something to be had there, much more than others think. I think most people, I used to hate Pascal's wager. I met a couple of grad students at Texas Tech, and they totally changed my mind. I started asking them questions about it, and they gave me answers, and I was like, whoa, actually, maybe Pascal's wager is a good argument. So
well, it's kind of funny because I think that pragmatic kind of apologetics for religion is kind of catching on a little bit for at least the people that never really took a side either way on hard atheism or hard Christianity, where you kind of have the soft middle in between people kind of like Adam Friended, who's been on this channel, who's actually an atheist, but he kind of he's looking at it from an evolutionary adaptation, like religions are kind of like group cohesion devices for people to be able to have socially cohesive societies. And it's especially interesting with the like different tests, or not tests, but different like surveys and different things like that have been put out for like questioning people's well-being, and how when people have some sort of strong religious connection to their community, they generally have a much stronger sense of well-being and healthier, happier, things like that. Mm-hmm.
On we've got a whole. Me and John have a whole. There's a whole group of people who are kind of apologists that we're being more and more drawn, reading more of their stuff and watching more. Like I'm sure you know who Jordan Peterson is, and Jonathan Pageau, and there's a bunch of people in this whole category that are more. It's totally different types of arguments, and you can't necessarily say that they're even apologists. Some of them. Yeah. But that's where he's going with what we're talking about. We're getting more drawn into that on this channel. We're more exploring it, but I don't know if that's even on your map right now.
It is. I've definitely read and listened to. I've listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson, and then I've read some of the psychologists that like heavily influenced Peterson. Who he himself has talked about Carl Jung, and
totally.
So I've read a pretty good amount of Carl Jung, and which even a lot of his like Jordan Peterson's pragmatic type of reasoning with regards to religion definitely seems to it echoes from Jung. At least it looks like it. And
Yes. Well,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say one thing. I've mentioned this a lot, but before I was a Christian, I was starting to become really intellectually convinced that there was a God. And it was really interesting because I was reading almost the exact same things that Jordan Peterson always talks about: Nietzsche, Carl Jung, Dostoevsky, and then a lot of New Age stuff thrown in there, things like the Tao Te Ching. And I was becoming really, really intellectually convinced that there was a God. Mostly a lot because of Jung, probably 30 or 40% of it having to do with Jung. But go ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's all right. That's really interesting. It's neat to hear that because I think a lot of people underestimate the influence of Jung because he's not only living on through Jordan Peterson, who's like one of the more popular people, one of the more influential people, certainly in the West right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
and he's grown so quick. When I first was listening to his Old Testament lectures, he had about 200,000 subscribers, and I was shopping around to some atheists I know because I thought they'd be more interested in that than standard Christian apologetics, because they would be. And turn around and he's got like 1,200,000 subscribers or something a year later, and he's practically a household name, if not, in fact, a household name. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, and it's that's one form of pragmatic arguments for belief in God. Namely, you might say like an earthly form. If you want to break it into the broadest types, it would be like there's earthly types, and then there's like heavenly types.
Right, pragmatic meaning it's better to bank on salvation than not. Like you mentioned, what'd you mention? Pascal's wager. Keep going.
Yeah, and I think in that case the trick is.
Did we lose him?
I don't know. Are you still there?
Yeah, looks like. Oh, there he's coming back. It looks like.
The last time that happened, I thought he just paused. So I thought this time it was just a pause. Did you disappear, James? Are you still there?
No, he's not in the chat. Oh no. It looks like he keeps on popping back. And then
what happened?
Leaving.
Did you mute him?
No.
If you don't like what somebody's saying, you don't have to mute him, John. Just challenge what he's saying.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, right. Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, seriously, that's kind of rude, John. Just mute him.
Sorry. Let's see.
James, come back. Come back. We want to hear you. Send him a different link. Oh, now he disappeared altogether.
Yeah. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I'll see if I can send him the link again. I don't know.
That was too bad.
I think he's probably having. Yeah, I think he's probably having some internet connection problems.
He was actually saying good things. We were talking about Jung. I guess he means something different by pragmatic. That's what I was trying to. His like pragmatic. What we were talking about is like pragmatic because religion is socially useful. Those are like those are really the game-changing arguments coming down the pike.
Yeah.
Stephanie, even Stephanie's going to start killing people with those arguments. But I think he was talking about a different, or it seemed like he was talking about a different thing by pragmatic apologetics, or at least a different version of that that he was about to explain to us.
Yeah, there's kind of a difference because there's the more like hardline atheists like David Sloan Wilson and Jonathan Haidt that see the utility of religion but are still like atheistic to their core. Whereas Jordan Peterson is, I don't know, I'd say more agnostic-ish, and really like seeking out like the truth behind religion.
But the key reason why he's starting to lean Christian is actually he's Matt Dillahunty said in that debate, he said, just because something is useful doesn't mean it's true. And Jordan Peterson started saying, this is something he said a lot. How could something be so useful if it's not, in fact, rooted in some kind of truth? That's why he's starting to lean towards the idea that there is a God. And he goes back and forth. Okay, here he is back.
Sorry,
what happened?
Sorry, I accidentally logged out. I didn't realize. I didn't realize.
You know, it happens. You get annoyed with what we say, and you're just like, I can't stand these guys anymore. I gotta go.
Yeah. Sorry about that. It's
That's all right.
But yeah. So long story short, I was just trailing off forever anyway. I think their pragmatic arguments are actually pretty good.
Yeah. So now take us up to your. You started your channel what, a year ago? Less than a year ago?
I started in the spring of 2016. I went consistently for a year and a half, and then when I was applying for PhDs, I was like, okay, I have to pour every minute I can into this because the application process is so rigorous. So I stepped back from YouTube a little bit and then started to come back into it once I got accepted into a school. And then maybe 6 months later, which is just this fall, I switched into debate, a debate theme for the channel.
Okay, cool. So your goal, how many shows do you have right now? You have about 2 or 3 a week?
Yeah, I'd say it averages 3. And right now the average is starting to go up. Now that I have break, I'm able to do a little bit more.
And you're looking for, by the way, John and I think, John, you'd be interested in joining some of the debates sometimes on his channel, right?
Oh, I'd have to figure out a good position for myself before I did any of that. I'm still in the searching column, so there's only a few topics that I'd say I'd be steady enough to be able to do rigorous apologetics for, really. Yeah, I've been watching your channel for a while now. Or let's see, I think I was introduced, when you had Inspiring Philosophy on. I listened to that debate and several others. Like I just listened to your latest one, on the virgin birth with RC and and with our friend Mr. Deist, Mr. Brass.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a blast. Like, if you ever want to do like a Freaky Friday debate, the one nice thing about that is, so for example, one topic that we might do is, and this might even be with a fellow Christian, could time travel make sense on a Christian worldview? Because it might have these like theological repercussions that would be really interesting, that we could like maybe go back in time and if we can maybe like sway how things play out, like it's so that's a really like, or does the simulation hypothesis, can it fit within the Christian worldview? Those types of arguments, I think, or do demonic possessions happen today? They wouldn't require as much prep time, because it's like, well, who studies that? Like, who's been using years of their life to study that already? Like,
this weirdo.
So it's like, whatever the topic is, I would think that, once both debaters know that that topic's open, they'd have the same amount of time to prep for it. So that's one nice thing.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Like, sort of a place for people to kind of like explore different ideas, like that, whether or not like it fits within the Christian worldview, or if it specifically wouldn't be able to fit within it, or could be good. Yeah, really good.
And I would actually be down for some debates, James. So I'll give you some topics that I would that I can do. I don't do everything. There's all types of debates that I don't really have a position on, but I'll give you the topics that I'd be interested in if they come up.
Cool.
And then I know a bunch of people who'd be interested. Some of them will hear this broadcast. And the question is, what should I do? Should I just give you their names, or some of you probably already know, or just have them, or should I just tell them about your channel and get them to come to you?
I would say I'm going to put out an announcement tomorrow, but if you're able to say it as well, it's immensely helpful, actually. If you just let them know, like, hey, if you got any
Yeah,
topic that you want to debate, just shoot James an
I'm in,
email. And
I'm in a chat group with 15 Christians,
oh,
and they're
cool.
all over the place in terms of some of them are actually really strong on weird esoteric type thing, not necessarily esoteric for your type of channel. They'd be right in line with what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
But they'd be really interested, so I'll tell them all.
cool. Thank you.
Stephanie knows all of them. Stephanie was on your channel 2 nights ago, right? Or 3 nights ago? What was that?
Stephanie, is that what SJ stands for?
Yes.
You're SJ
Steph-
Thomason?
yes, Stephanie.
Oh, I didn't know that's what. Okay, yeah, definitely she was, and it was a pleasure to have her. I never knew what SJ stood for. Right, that's cool.
I don't know what the J stands for, actually. Stephanie, is she there? Stephanie, what's the J stand for? She'll probably watch this. So how was that? How'd that go?
Excellent, absolutely. Oh, it was. Sorry, I thought you were. I wasn't sure if you were referring to right now or then. It was excellent. Actually, we talked about doing future ones because she's well read and she's also very composed, and so that's exactly what we're looking for. Is rather than the dumpster fire. I know it's tempting for entertainment, but it's nice to have people that are where, like I said, the sharing of ideas. We're big on openness, the psychological trait. Jordan Peterson talks about that all the time. We're high on trait openness, so that's what we're shooting for.
Definitely.
So cool. That sounds great. So okay, so let's go on with your apologetics that you were working on individually. What happened when you dropped out? You were telling us about pragmatic.
Yeah. So I think that decision theory is the backbone for these arguments. Usually, that's what people fall back like that. I think that's what they should fall back on. That's like the foundation of these arguments. Rational agents maximize their own preferences, and if they don't maximize their own preferences, they're not optimally rational. And given that the atheist community claims to be, always concerned with being rational, well, if religion actually makes you happier, and if it makes you healthier, and increases your longevity, so in other words, like, how many years of your life you're able to use, then you should be a Christian. And in fact, even
then climb aboard the God train, people. Right. Get on the train.
Yeah, and so they'll contest maybe. Usually they don't attack decision theory, which I think is smart. They know better usually. They sometimes will attack the idea, in fact, they'll almost always attack the idea that Christianity does bring about greater happiness. And that's something, there is empirical data that, like, I can give arguments for that. Like, I can give peer-reviewed literature that does support the idea, some of which is experimental, not just correlational. So in other words, like, we have reason to draw a causal inference in saying that it's the religion that's actually bringing about the happiness, rather than just a correlation where we find the religiosity and happiness move together when we chart them out numerically. So it's definitely, I think, it's a compelling argument.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that especially when, like, going through Sam Harris's book, where The Moral Landscape, how he draws upon well-being as being a primary component for building a secular morality. And so if well-being is the prime, I guess, value that we're trying to maximize, then the well-being that religious people have over secular people should be kind of I guess, ideal for them. Yeah. It kind of puts them into a hard spot where they're having to fall away from their own secular version of morality in order to hold to what they believe to be true. But also, yeah.
Right, but that's exactly why we're starting to get people who are atheists by belief, but they're starting to see they're starting to get a rational, science, evidence-based conviction about the utility of religion, because it's the truth. At least that aspect of it, mm-hmm. Whether you believe in God or not, that aspect of it that's why I started talking about it in my videos, because that's a game changer. I mean, you just can't argue against the basic truth of that. You know, it's basically true, and it can be backed up by what you just said, James, the science. Correct?
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, absolutely. It can be backed up by the science, and I think it's definitely not just correlational. There does seem to be some experimental evidence that religion is the actual cause of the happiness.
Right.
There is some, yeah. So it's a fun argument. I definitely enjoy it, and it's something I hope to get back into when the time is right, in terms of like being able to debate it on other channels.
Well, just from anecdotally from my own life, I mean, I have so much more peace of mind now than I had prior to when I was a Christian. I mean, prior to me being a Christian. So,
yeah,
but yeah,
definitely. I feel the same way. My life has improved. I feel happier and more fulfilled as a Christian than beforehand. I think that's what the vast majority of Christians would say. And like I said, the empirical data seems to support it.
well, you seem more like a. How strong is your faith in terms of a motivating influence in your life? It seems like it's probably your main motivational source, but you don't strike me as any of the downsides of what an anti-theist, like Shannon is an anti-theist, and she's the one who told me that I'd like you. And you don't strike me as having any of the things that an anti-theist would say would be the downsides of religion. Correct? Am I wrong, or am I?
I do, but some of them I just I think they're.
Did that make sense? What I asked you?
I think I get what you mean.
In other words, when anti-theists complain about they have a boogeyman version of a religious person. It isn't you. It's like a fundamentalist, gay-hating, science-denying psychopath, like Stephanie. No,
yeah, like like the media will show like these people who say God hates fags and stuff like that.
Right.
It's pretty ugly. Yeah, and. But I'm definitely not perfect. Like I don't say that God hates fags or something like that. But I have other like things that are like I'm human, so I've got my own like sins or whatever. But I think that Christians have to be honest with themselves and consider that sometimes we do come off probably in a way that even in non-Christian circles. So let's say, for example, like I went today and I met people that I was considering moving in with. Like you could just say it's like norms of politeness where I wouldn't like give like a backhanded like compliment. And sometimes as Christians, like, so even if I'm not talking about religion, like it's just rude to give like a backhanded compliment or something. But like that's just like the norms of like trying to be gentle or kind. And sometimes Christians, like we sometimes accidentally do that. We can kind of come off in a way that could come off as smug. Like if we say, oh, these God haters are just really at it today. It's like how would you refer, like if Muslims called you like an Allah hater, like they're trying to define you by your alleged hate of their God. Like being defined by hate in itself is usually pretty ugly because it's such a ugly thing. So long story short, I think that if we as Christians we don't have to kiss butt. Like I said, I'm willing to just say that like Jesus is the only way. I think that's the truth, and people don't like it. I don't care. Like it's just the way. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to stop saying that. I'm not going to start changing what I say. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I don't have to be obnoxious. Like I don't have to be rude and overbearing or smug. Worst of all. So
one of the things that Christians tend to do, that I noticed a lot because it's really, really, really anathema in secular world, is that, and almost every Christian outside of myself, and actually John, and with scant few others, they feel really comfortable moralizing, saying like, oh, you shouldn't do that. When you're a secular person, like you're a 15-year-old, that is the one thing you do not do. You do not take the moral of, you don't go, oh, I can't believe you would do X, That's like the one thing Christians have no problem moralizing and getting in people's faces about behaviors that aren't necessarily any of their business. And it's kind of counterproductive to being, if your goal is to be salt and light and you're trying to actually be a good Christian, You know, it's counterproductive to that goal because nobody likes it and it doesn't work. You know, it has the exact opposite effect. It turns people off. It doesn't make them trust you and want to confide in you and want to be helped by you. It makes them think you're a self-righteous jerk.
I totally agree. Go ahead.
You don't seem to have that in you at all. You don't seem to have any trace of it. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nice of you. I appreciate you saying that. I think maybe, you know, in some cases I maybe have my, you know, maybe I'm hopefully not, but, you know, I'm imperfect. So maybe I'm smug sometimes. Like I try hard not to be, though. And I think it's like, as Christians, we have to be open to the fact that we might be doing that. And I think sometimes when I was younger as a Christian, I don't really think I thought through, like, am I doing that? And when I started realizing it, I started to grow out of it more.
When you first became a Christian, were you really, really into like witnessing to people and trying to, or are you still like that now? I don't know.
I really was. I think, you know, it's kind of like ebbed and flowed in terms of how consistently I've done it. I still think it's what I'm, you know, called to do. I'm not quite as, like, compared to when I was in ministry. You know, there's so much positive spiritual influence on me that it was like more on my mind, and hopefully I can get back to that. But and I think that's good. I think that, you know, you have to do it in a way that I think it's probably, you know, there are better and worse ways of doing it. But yeah, I definitely would, you know, I think most young Christians moralize. They kind of start picking out other people's sins as well, in addition to their own. And even like the scriptures talk, like when Jesus talks about like not throwing pearls before swine, like they're not going to take it well anyway. And so I've kind of grown out of that to an extent, at least, I hope. But I've got maybe like I hate to say it. I'm sorry. I maybe have like a couple more minutes, and I've got to run because I've got to run an errand yet before the debate.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right. Well, whenever. That's no problem. Whenever you need to go.
That's actually perfect because I gotta head off soon, real soon too.
Go ahead.
Well, I did have, I guess, one, I don't know, question, or I don't know, something I've definitely been considering regarding these types of debates that have kind of been going on for a while now. Like, you know, like with Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and William Lane Craig. This thing has been happening for a long time, and there's, I don't know, when I watched those types of debates before, I always kind of noticed it did little to actually foster conversation at all. It's like both people are trying to misinterpret the other person as much as possible, or like do moral grandstanding against the other person to like prove their own worth. And I don't know, something I noticed from your latest video with Mr. Brass and RC Apologist was how both of them were not too far off from each other in regards to their like worldviews, so that there was this shared ability to actually like consider the points from the other side that I found really satisfying. Like they were both kind of like arguing from a position where the opposite could actually like be true. Like it's not a complete testament to faith that Jesus was born of a virgin. Like there's different sects that are kind of lax on that and things like that. And with Mr. Brass being a deist, it's not completely outside the realm of possibility. And I think like it's really interesting to watch those types of debates where both parties are at least have the like potential, like theoretically they could change their minds by the end of this and something like that. So like
willing to listen at least to the other
person.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like even like it's interesting with people like Adam Fremded, who is more, I guess, open to religion as being a kind of necessary thing, even though he's an atheist. I think it would be very interesting to see somebody like him arguing against somebody else that's also an atheist, just kind of going over something like that, or like Christians like going over different arguments for God. I don't know. It's an interesting thing I've seen, and it's much more fascinating to watch those types of debates, at least for myself, in seeing where there actually is this possibility of change occurring between the other persons.
Yeah, it is definitely like I like that being willing to give the other side, even though, so for example, me, like I'm not an atheist at all. Being willing to say like, well, let me try to understand you in the most charitable way possible. Like, let me at least put together, because sometimes we like take pieces of our own worldview or pieces of stuff that are clearly inconsistent with the worldview, like atheism, and we kind of like put it in there and we're like, look, that doesn't make sense. And they're like, yeah, but that's, I don't even believe in that. Like that inconsistent piece that you just put into it, I don't think that's the case. Like, is that you want to give them the most charitable like understanding, and it doesn't mean you're saying it's like any more true. You're just trying to kind of, like I said, be charitable to them. And
right.
There's a value.
Well, you got to, one of the things you got to do that I think I made a video about this. I might not have. You can't take other people's beliefs personally. That's the mistake that everybody else makes. Is like, if somebody doesn't believe in God, that's nothing to do with me. That's where they're at in life. And if you want to be really charitable and smart about it, you got to assume, especially if they're a reasonable person like a Shannon or even Apologia, he's not that unreasonable of a human being. You got to assume that if you had lived the life that he lived and experienced life as he experienced it, you would probably come to conclusions that are relatively similar to what he would come to. Do you know what I'm saying? If you're experiencing another person as a reasonable human being, then it follows that how they arrived at a conclusion that, even though you view the conclusion as false, like atheism, if you grew up in their circumstances and you experienced life through their lens, you would probably come to similar conclusions, right? Or no?
I think there's like theological stuff that I don't know for sure if that's the case, but I think that it would certainly, like, our experiences definitely influence our perceptions.
Theological, do you mean like a Romans 1:20? Or
not quite. Well, maybe in a more like Romans, like chapters 8 and 9 of like whether or not we are saved as a result of our. I think it's possible. I'd have to think about that. That's actually a really interesting issue. I hate to say it. Like, I have to run in a second. Like,
oh, no problem. Yeah. So next time you come on, we'll talk further on that, because that's a big. Right. I mean, I think I know what you're about to say in terms of, there may be some willfulness going on in the case of a non-believer. Is that one of the things that you were going to say, potentially?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. In that ballpark, you could say. Okay,
so that's definitely something to be explored next time you come on. So are you taking off right now? John, did you want to say something before he leaves? You want to ask him a question?
Nope, I got my question. Thanks for coming on, James. This was really cool.
My pleasure. Like, thank you guys for having me. I enjoyed it, and I'm sorry. Like, I'm happy to do this again. Like, and we can pick up on the same topic that we left off on.
Yeah, James, this was awesome. Definitely, we'll do this again, probably relatively soon, like maybe in a month. Cool. And you can actually become a recurring character. It'll be like our sideshow Bob. You'll come on and like every once in a while you come on our channel and tell us what's what, and give us maybe we'll start doing a I don't know. Now that I've had you once on the show, I'll start watching your debates, and maybe the next time we'll start talking about what's going on your channel and delve into the specifics, and we'll talk about what we just started up to talk about this time. But
cool. You got it.
So good. Awesome, James. This was a really good conversation, and you want to say goodbye? Tell us where to find you.
Oh yeah, Modern Day Debate is the name of the channel. Would love to see you there. And again, thank you guys for having me on. This is a blast. I love the conversation.
Yeah, it was good. It's good stuff.
Cool. Well, take care. Have a good night.